All right, happy Monday to you, wherever you are. This is a holiday here in the U.S., so I have no idea if anybody's going to show up today for the broadcast, but that's okay, because this will be recorded, and we're going to talk about two goddesses from different recent traditions. I say recent because there's a very good chance that they may come from a single source idea. And these are the goddesses Kali and Hela. And as I said in the title here, Kali and Hela resonate very strongly with the planet Saturn. And it's important that we understand how to interface with Saturn. It's the most difficult of planets. It's the most difficult of energies. It's the most challenging, but it's also the most liberating. And it's absolutely necessary. And so, when we look at the energies of Saturn by itself, Saturn can be extremely harsh. So when we experience Saturn through the feminine, through the goddesses of Kali and Hela, then we get to see what Saturn is really trying to do. But we also get to see the true nature of the goddess, the true nature of the mother. And so we're going to be talking about that. I'll share a little bit about some information about these goddesses, and we will have an open question and answer for people. So, but I'm also just open to hear what these beautiful mothers would like to speak to us today. So I'm going to be listening to that. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because we've been talking a lot about the eclipse energy, and I've been talking a lot about how energy in these kinds of situations can be very challenging. I've even said things to the effect that these effects of the eclipse and similar types of instances, what they do is they come in and they tear away all of the things that are sabotaging you, all of your unconscious issues. It brings them to light. And there have been people, as I've shared this recently, who have gotten very upset. They don't like the idea of change. They don't like the idea of feeling powerless. They like the message that I give, which is that we are fully responsible for everything that we create in our lives. But when I say that, situations like an eclipse or, certain astrological phenomena, especially if it's in your chart, could put you in a position where the universe, at least you will have the experience that the universe is destroying your world and changing everything up and upside down, and you will feel like a victim. You'll feel like everything is being taken from you, and some people can't hear that. And there's been a few people who have said to me that this is too negative, even when I tell them that this is a tremendous opportunity for growth. That when we can't change, we're not aware of the things that we need to change, and the universe comes in and says, okay, it's time for you to move up to the next level. That's hard for some people to hear, that what's going to happen is your whole world is going to change. One of the things that's going to be helpful for people, especially if you're new to my channel, is to listen to the teachings that are coming through with an understanding that my entire focus of this teaching is for your evolution, but more importantly for your joy, your happiness. And it's interesting to me because this is part of my job, part of what I'm designed to do, is to be somebody who helps with transformation. And transformation can be challenging at times, because in order to transform, you have to let go of old ideas about yourself. You have to let go of old energies. And so it can absolutely feel like a death. You know, while I'm on the subject, let me share something that I've found working with the runes. The runes, for those of you who don't know, are the ancient alphabet of Northern Europe, and these are also representing fundamental energies in the universe. And when I work with the runes, you know, runes can be used for divination. But one thing I found that the runes don't do, no matter how hard I've tried, the runes will not give indications having to do with actual physical death. And I've thought about that a lot recently, and that's because from the runes' perspectives, they're dealing with your spiritual energy. And from the perspective of the runes, there is no end. There's no physical death. You know, we see physical death, you know, when somebody's life is over. You know, whatever this meat bag is, you know, when this meat bag comes to an end, then we say, oh, so-and-so has died. And, you know, that's the end of them. And that's true for, you know, at least in terms of their physical identity in that incarnation. That's done. It's a costume that they wore. They've now taken it off. They're not going to wear that same costume again. But the spirit underneath is eternal. And so the runes, whenever I've worked with that and people have asked me questions about, you know, somebody's health, are they going to die, that sort of thing, the runes just don't tell you. And even though there are symbols in there that relate to death, they all represent transformation. So, you know, when the rune for death comes up, for instance, the Yuhuaj rune, which is the closest thing we have, it's not static. It doesn't mean that's it, it's over. It means you're going to transform. So it could mean anything. It could mean, yeah, that somebody's going to physically die and transform and go on to the next life. And it could also mean that they're going to go through a personal death, because from the universe's perspective, there's no difference. Every death that you go through is a death of your limitations, your ideas of what is. And when that has to transform, you experience a death. And so that is why these goddesses are called goddesses of death. But I'm going to share with you some of the symbology behind them and what they really represent, and how to use these energies or surrender to these energies in a way where you can get closer to the mother goddess and actually have healing. Because Saturn is very misunderstood. One of the things that Saturn brings is healing. But first we have to experience the challenging aspects of Saturn, which in our limitation we see death and destruction. But that is only true if we're holding on to things that no longer serve us, or that have, you know, reached the end of their usefulness. When we let go of them, then it's actually a rebirth. It's not a death at all. So we're going to talk about that. I have to turn my lights on here because it's starting to get cloudy and dark outside. And I'll do some ads here, and then I'll check to see who's online, and of course I will take some questions. So hang on a sec, I will be right back. Okay, so let's get started with some teaching about these goddesses. So one thing I have discovered just recently doing a little bit of research again, which I'm reminding myself that I actually saw this a while ago, but I forget. I look at so much stuff, sometimes the information just falls out of my ears. But I find it interesting that the names Kali and Hela on the surface have such a strong resemblance to each other. Well, as it so happens, they may actually be the same word. Now, I'm not convinced that our Indo-European ancestors, that there was one goddess. I think that these names came a little later. But I find it interesting that we have, actually now that I'm thinking about it, that I'm getting a different message, which is no, this has been the name for her all along. But the Indo-European root word is khel. Khel. You know, it's not a K, it's not a H, it's a combination of both. Khel. And it's where we get the word hole from, like when you dig a hole in the ground. It is the word to cover is what it means. So it ends up having all kinds of other meanings like dark and black. But it also has a close connection to the Sanskrit word for time, which is kal, and death. So we've got all of these things mixed together, and all of these connections, but I'm really interested in this idea of the root for their names being the word to cover. So as you know, we talk a lot about the unconscious mind here. It's probably the one thing I focus on the most because it's absolutely essential to have an awareness of what's going on in the unconscious mind and how to interface with it, because if not, then what ends up happening is that our life controls us. So you've heard me talk about this a lot, so I'll continue with the theme. Most human beings operate in such a way where they interface with their universe as being victims of circumstance, that life is happening to them. And when I do work as a psychic, which just means that people call me on the phone and I use the runes to answer their questions, you know, people will ask me, do you see somebody coming to me in my future? And I stop them and I say, let me help you understand how this works. Your life is not happening to you. There isn't a time in the future that, you know, if you just keep walking or if you just sit at home, something is going to happen to you on this date at this time. That's not how things work. And so, you know, I know that you called me because you want me to tell you, you know, when you're going to meet your husband or whatever it is. And I said, but as a shaman, I would much rather work with you to help you create what it is that you want. Because otherwise, I can take a look and see, if you don't do anything, where things are going to go. And then I can tell you what will happen if you just continue to allow life to happen to you. But it's, you know, it's a complete myth that life happens to you. It's it's an illusion that we go through life and things are happening to us. What's really happening is that we are constantly, continuously making choices. Every single nanosecond we're making a choice, we're having a belief, we're reacting to a feeling. And every time we do that, we are operating from assumptions. We have unconscious assumptions, meaning we are unaware of it. We have unconscious assumptions about what the earth is, what the universe is, what we are, how the universe feels about us. You know, even if people say, oh, I don't believe that the universe has a consciousness. I don't believe in God. Even if people say that, even if they intellectually believe that, on an emotional level, we always act as though everything is having some kind of an emotional relationship to us. And so if on an unconscious level we are of the belief that, on whatever level, that the universe is our enemy, or the universe is limiting us, or the universe is a parent, that is going to determine our continued beliefs. And so the real opportunity for change comes when we have that moment where we can shift into a different belief system. I do get people who contact me every now and then who tell me that they're afraid, that there's something about what I'm teaching that that they want, that is interesting to them, but at the same time they're afraid to go deeper, because they know that if they continue to follow these teachings, that they're going to completely lose their old assumptions about who they are, what the universe is, what God is. And this is very frightening. Of course, this is a death. And so this is my role, whether I like it or not. This is what I'm here to do. I'm here to transform. I'm here to be an agent of change and growth and transformation in people's lives. So it's no wonder that I have such a strong affiliation towards these two goddesses. I've had experiences with both of them, and it's very hard to put into words my experience of them, but the feeling that I get after having worked with them is similar to a lot of people, which is, this is the mother, this is the everything. Everything comes from this essence, whether it be Kali or Hela. It comes from, all the gods come from this essence. I know there's a difference in terms of the mythological understanding. From the Norse perspective, Hela is the daughter of Loki. But anyway, we'll talk about that as we go further. So the best way to interact with me, again, it's a Monday, it's a holiday. I'm sure a lot of people are hanging out with their family, especially here in the U.S. The best way to interact with me is to leave me a question. And then if I'm able to, I will do my best to answer that question. Okay, so no questions today. People want to listen to the goddess. So let's dive into that. So I talked a little bit about Kali. Let's go a little further. So, once again, take a look at her. She's a very frightening being to behold when she appears to you in this form. So, it's really hard to find pictures of her in her true fierce form. I mean, even when people, lots of times will make these devotional pictures of her, and they'll have her, with her tongue hanging out but no blood, or she'll have kind of a smile on her face. People are trying to honor the goddess. I did that myself as I posted that picture of Hela, because I could find pictures of Hela where she's naked and half dead and half alive, and I want my personal instinct is that I want to represent her in a way that I feel is respectful. But these are two goddesses that do not need that. When you see Kali in her true form, she's very frightening, very dare I say unattractive at first. And the way she comes across is she has either dark blue or black skin, just completely, totally black. And of course that represents the emptiness. While I'm on the subject, I was flipping through something a while ago, and somebody talking about Kali and quoted an astronaut. I didn't catch the name of who the astronaut was, but when this person, one of the first astronauts that went out into outside the the confines of Earth, came back and somebody asked him, "Did you see God while you were up there?" And he said, "Yes, and she's black," meaning the blackness of space. And it's, you know, you think about it, we live in this earth and we've got our atmosphere is such that when the sun is shining, we don't see the blackness, we see the blue. We don't see the stars, we see the blue sky. So it's feels much safer, it feels more closed in. But you know, when all you have is that black surrounding you, then it becomes really empty. And so the emptiness of the feminine comes through. So let's talk about what she represents. I've talked to you about the fierce look on her face when she is depicted in such a way where she's got her tongue hanging out and blood is gushing out of her mouth, and she has a fierce look in her eyes. I don't want to mimic her, but a very fierce look in her eyes, tongue hanging out, blood coming out, and then she's got all these different things in her hands. You can see she has a severed head. She has a garland of skulls, which represent the syllables. So the aksharas in the Vedic tradition are the closest that they get to the runes. They have different syllables, and I think they have more of them, but it represents the same thing. It represents the powers that create the universe. And so the skulls, at least one interpretation, the skulls that she's wearing are the aksharas, are the syllables, the sacred sound syllables of the universe. So that lets you know that she, similar to Odin, has mastered the syllables, which contain all of the mysteries of the universe. So then the question is, well, why are they skulls? Why aren't they letters? Why are they skulls? Well, I'm sure there's a lot of interpretations for that, but the skulls represent the transformative power that we experience through the proper use of sound, which we could say speech. One way to look at it is it is our speech that actually kills us. Because when you speak something, you know, and I'm not just talking about when we're very careful, it's when we're not careful and we blurt things out or we say something to somebody. You know, in the spell of the 9 knots, we get to number 6, which is when we touch our mouth and we say, 6, my words are fixed. And that is directly in line. When you do that, you're going in the clockwise direction. By the time you get to number 6 there, you are facing the southwest, which is the realm of the underworld, which is the realm of Hela, and which is has strong connections to Kali and to the planet Saturn. It's with our words. So what are our words? Our words are, you know, the idea behind sound is this. I didn't realize I was going to go in this direction, but the idea behind spoken sound is that we create. That is why speech is a magical tool. Now we're in the later stages. We're in the early stages of Dvapara Yuga, which is we've just come out of Kali Yuga. So we're still in that time period where we don't have the ability to just simply think things into existence, at least not without a lot of training. And there is a time when you go through the different time periods. There's a time where human beings don't have to speak. And when they do speak, they actually, every time they open their mouth, they speak, they create things, literally create stuff. So our speech is still has that power, but because we're so far away from the galactic center. In case you don't know, the yugas are time periods. And I won't get too deep into that, but the term Kali Yuga, which I'm sure you've heard, means the time of darkness, and shares the same name as the goddess Kali, or at least very similar word to her name. And that is when we are in Kali Yuga, is when our solar system is the furthest away from the galactic center. And when we are closest to the galactic center, then our latent spiritual powers are stimulated. And so during those times, we don't even have to speak. We can just think our intentions. If we do speak, speech has such power. It's like the gods. You know, when the gods speak, the world shakes. Well, this is the power that human beings have when they're fully awakened. So when we're in Kali Yuga and we speak, our speech tends to drag us down. So we say things that, you know, we don't really realize, that come from our unconscious. And, you know, every time we speak, we're making a vow. This is why a lot of spiritual practices are, you know, people won't speak. Because when you speak, you end up tying yourself down to this material plane. So, and everything, you know, every time we speak, every time, especially when we speak, we're making some kind of a vow. So we can't get away with saying, oh, I didn't mean that, or that doesn't mean anything. Now, I'm not saying this to frighten you or make you, you know, get all perfectionist or legalistic about your life. Just go ahead and live your life. This is where we live. We live now in Dvapara Yuga, which is just coming out of Kali Yuga. But it is always important to be aware of your speech. And I teach my, my students, especially my more advanced students, that they be very careful about how they speak and what they say. So let's say, for instance, you know, I've worked with this before, where I've worked with a student who was hurt or felt betrayed by somebody and had a lot of anger about that. And so they would say, you know, that they wanted that person to be, you know, negatively affected or harmed or something like that. And I'd say, you have to be careful what you say. And then she says, oh, I don't mean it. And I go, yeah, but let me help you. Instead of saying something like that, what you want to do is talk about your feelings. You can say, I'm feeling a lot of anger, I'm feeling a lot of resentment, or I'm feeling a lot of hurt. And I'm thinking, you know, things I wish I wasn't thinking about this person. Because then you're not speaking anything into existence. But shamans have this ability. And so the more that you work with me, by the way, the more you have this ability to speak things into existence. When, you know, it's kind of hard for me when I'm teaching, because I always try to use things in the third person or talk, you know, in the, you know, not saying here's the truth, when I'm talking about what happens if a person's not in the greatest spot, you know. What if a person were to do X, Y, and Z? I try and be very careful about what I say. And sometimes you'll hear me catch myself, and I'll say something, you know, such and such always happens, and I'll stop, and I'll say, in the past, it always felt to me as though such and such always happened. So when you do that, you're owning your experience, you're owning your feelings, you're not just saying it. So when people say that always happens, or this always happens, then you end up creating that, because our speech is like that. So this is, again, getting back to the skulls that she's wearing are the aksharas, the syllables of the universe, meaning that our speech is what kills us, what holds us down. But the other aspect of it is that the sacred sound syllables are also gateways to infinity. They are gateways of dying to our false idea of ourselves, to our false idea of reality. And so that when we're on this side of it, then it looks like death. It looks like a skull. But it only looks like that while we're attached. When we're not attached, you know, those skulls will transform into who knows what, little things of fire, or who knows, you know, what these sound syllables really are. Maybe light. So that's one of Kali's things that she wears. She wears those garland of skulls. What about her mouth? She's got her mouth open and her tongue is hanging out, and there's blood coming out of her mouth. This represents her unceasing hunger to consume negative things within her children. So when you see her coming at you like this, it means that she is completely focused on consuming all of the negativity within you, whether it be fear, loneliness, sadness, envy, hate, you know, whatever, you pick it. Anything that is not serving you. she sees this as something she wants to consume and destroy. And this comes from a myth about her, and I won't get too much into it, but she's fighting these demons of ego, and I forget the name of one of these demons. She's fighting these demons of ego, and she harms him, stabs him or something like that, and so he starts bleeding, like gushing blood. Every single drop of blood that hits the ground from him turns into an exact clone of himself. So, you know, within a matter of seconds, there's hundreds of thousands of this same ego deity, which means that, you know, when you try and crush ego, when you try and destroy it, it's like whack-a-mole. It just makes it multiply. It's very hard for us to come at ego like that. So we need a power that can handle that. So she transforms the goddess, the mother, transforms herself into Kali, and she goes around and consumes all of these demons. And so that's the blood. It's the blood of her consuming these demons that are trying to destroy her children. And so that's really important to understand, that she's crazed with this desire to protect her children at all costs. And I've said this before, there's nothing more powerful than the protection of the mother. I mean, the last place you want to be, it doesn't matter what animal it is, the last place you want to be is be between the mother and the children. You know, this is, by the way, why a lot of people get into real trouble when they're in the wilderness and they get attacked by grizzly bears. It's because they unwittingly, they're just, you know, stupid humans walking along, and they unwittingly walk between the mother and her cub. And so that's, you know, the mother goes after you, and just, you know, cause all kinds of damage. Well, this is what Kali is doing when she's going after the demons that are trying to destroy you. She's wanting to consume you. So that's all the blood that's coming out of her, that the fierce look in her face, that's what that is. So there are a bunch of other things, and there's one other thing that I want to talk to you about, which is her skirt of severed arms. Now, this is something a lot of people don't see, but she's naked, for one thing. She's completely naked, except for the garland of skulls that she's wearing, and a skirt of severed human arms. So take a look at that. So what is that all about? The skirt of severed arms. What is that all about? Well, what that is once again, we talk about it is our thoughts, our feelings, our reactions, our beliefs, our actions that creates the future. You know, in the Norse tradition, you've got weird, which is in the present moment. You have a thought, you have a feeling, you have a reaction, you take an action, you create a pattern every single nanosecond, which gets lodged in the past. That pattern in the past becomes a debt, which is what karma is. Karma is a debt. You create a debt that you have to experience in the future. And so that can be positive or negative. So the garland of severed arms represents our actions. So it represents work. And this is something that is lost on a lot of us, is that we actually work really hard to create whatever it is that we have. You know, I've shared about this, is that you know, there's a person in my life who I'm related to, who is definitely the most miserable person I've ever met, I've ever known. If you were to run into him, he would tell you all kinds of sob stories about his life, and maybe you would believe him. Maybe you would think he was really a horrific victim of circumstance and how he's been betrayed by everybody in his life. Except the difference is I've known him for over 5 decades, and I've watched him. I've watched him create his life. He's worked at it, and I've watched him continuously put tons and tons of energy into being miserable. And so this is what this represents, is that whatever issues you're going through, whatever challenges, whatever difficulties, they are of your own making. So what she's doing is that she's wearing this garland, she's wearing this skirt of severed arms, which means that she takes them from you. So she's relieving you of all of the effort that you've put in. She's cutting off your arms, so to speak. She's taking away all of the effort that you're doing on an unconscious level to continue to create all of the challenges and problems in your life. She's coming to free you of that. So again, when we're on the end of that, where we are attached, emotionally attached to our lives as we want it to be, we're attached to all of our unconscious destructive, self-destructive issues, then somebody has to come in and relieve us of that. And as she's coming in with her, with her sword and we're doing all that, she's going to war with all of your defects, then that's what you're going to see, and it's going to be very frightening, very painful. But when you get on the other side of that, when you surrender to that, or you're on the other side of that cleansing process, then what you see is the most beautiful, loving, sweet, kind young woman that is your mother. So anyway, so that's some symbolism of Kali. I'll take a look and see if there are any questions, and then we'll take a look at Hela here. Alright, so let's see. Again, I'm going to look for the questions. That's how I can best help you. So am I seeing any questions here? Okay, Witcher says, can one pray to Kali to help face your fears and anxieties? Yeah. That is one of the main reasons that people worship Kali. For that very reason. Yep. That's what she's there for. Okay, let's see. Travis Cup says, I don't know what you're asking. Why does, and then the word CERN, have Kali out front? So I don't know what that means. I can't answer that question for you. Okay, so let's continue here. Let's take a tiny little bit of a break, and then we'll come back and then we'll talk about Hela and what she represents, and we'll see where we go from there. So now let's take a look at Hela here. Whoops, what just happened? Oh, that's a bummer. I did something on my screen here which is going to make things difficult for me. I'll have to figure out what I did to fix that. Oh, maybe if I do this. Oh, yeah, that fixed it. Okay. All right, so Dive into Spirit 33 says, is there a ritual that is specifically for Kali? The short answer to that question is yes, there is. In order to know how Kali wants to work with you best, I need to take a look at your chart. So I would need to know all of your birth information. And then what we do is we find out where Saturn is in your chart. We find out what house it's in. We find out what sign it's in. And that will tell us how Kali wants to be worshipped for each individual person. So let's just say, for example, for me, I don't even have to look it up. I've got Saturn in my 6th house in Capricorn. So what that means is that first, Saturn is the 6th house is one of the death houses, and it's also the house of illness and karma and service and all that kind of stuff. So normally Saturn in that house can potentially be a really bad thing because it means you might have a lot of illness. In my case, it works out pretty good because it's in Capricorn, which is a Saturn sign. So Saturn in its own house, actually that's not its own house, but Saturn in its own sign means that Saturn's in its own home, meaning that it's comfortable. So in order for me to get the most out of Kali, what I would need to do, since it's in Capricorn, is I would need to face west, because that is the direction of Saturn. And then I would need to get an idol of Kali, because when whatever planet you're worshiping, I mean, it could be Mars, it wouldn't matter. Whatever planet you're worshiping, if it's in a Saturn sign, then that means that whatever planet it is wants to be worshipped with an idol. So what I would need to do is face west, get an idol of Kali, and then I'd have to adorn the idol as though, because you're treating it like a person in your home. So you put flowers around it and put things around it, light incense, whatever, to make it feel at home. And then I would do a Kali mantra, and again, I would have to look at my chart and look and see which syllables, which form of Kali, all those kinds of things. So these are the things you're asking me, is there a specific ritual? There is a very specific ritual. The way that the universe works is, if you don't know any better, you can get away with a lot of stuff. And so when it comes to mantra and ritual, a lot of people are able to just get away with whatever, just find something on the internet, find a ritual for Kali and do it for her. But because I actually know what the science is behind putting it together, I can't do that. So if you're asking me to give you a ritual for Kali, because I know what I know, I am karmically bound to only give you a ritual that will come directly from your chart. So for people who want to do that, they can go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. So any tips for a ritual? Yeah, so like I said, it completely depends on, for instance, I gave you what mine was, but let's say you had Saturn in Leo, for example. If Saturn was in Leo, then that would mean that Saturn wanted you to face east and to light a candle and then do a mantra or some kind of ritual. So it's very different. So this is why, again, the science of Vedic astrology is so important. When you have all these things put together, then you get the most finely attuned ritual for you that will give you what Saturn wants to give you in your life. Or Kali. In this specific instance, you asked about Kali. Having said that, you can just simply reach out to her in any kind of prayer and ask for her to guide you towards what ritual she wants. And she sometimes does talk directly to people. I'm not going to speak for her in this instance. Like I said, if I were to do it, I would just simply want to look at your chart. But you can ask her yourself. Don't take my word for anything. Okay, so oak tree. Let's see. I'm not. Okay, is there a question? Yeah. Oak tree 69 says, during the eclipse, I wished for release of past traumas. Now I'm facing them head on, I guess, and trust Kali is helping me lean into them. Well, yeah, you got exactly what you asked for, and that's what eclipses are all about, by the way. Eclipses are all about, you know, I mean, we talk about all these horrible things that eclipses do, but again, that's only because we're attached to the things that are actually doing us harm. And we don't know it. And when so we're attached to them, we're trying to protect them, then as the universe comes in to relieve us of those things, then it's very challenging. So you got exactly what you asked for, so you should be grateful, and I'm sure you are. And yes, the only thing left for you to do now is trust. And listen, it hurts. You know, like when you're at the doctor and the doctor says, okay, this is going to sting or this is going to hurt, that knowledge is great. It's great to have that knowledge, but it still doesn't take away, you know, your desire to wince and scream and do whatever to try and get away from, you know, whatever it is the doctor is doing that's causing you pain. So don't judge yourself. You know, it's difficult and it's painful, and it's okay to scream in pain and be uncomfortable and to mourn and to be sad and whatever else is going on. But yes, you're right. Trusting is the only way through. You know, denying it and complaining about it, which is what a lot of people do, that is, of course, only going to lengthen the amount of challenge that you will go through, because it'll take you that much longer to let go. So, all right. Okay, so yeah, I've already told you what you need to do then. Now, I don't know if this is Western astrology or Vedic, because they're very different. So if that's dive into Spirit 33, you have Saturn and Capricorn in the third house. If that's Western astrology, it might be very different if I were to look at it in your Vedic chart. But if that's what it is, I already told you exactly what you need to do. So finding a mantra is something that's important as well, and that is something that takes some time. I have to look at where somebody's moon is in the nakshatra, and I have to look it up in books and that sort of thing. So I'm not going to give you a mantra, because I want to make sure that, you know, if I'm going to give you one, I give you a right one. But you already know exactly how to do it. Face west, get an image of her, an idol of her, and adorn that idol and worship her. That's how she wants to be worshipped in your chart, assuming that that's accurate. Shiva Lingam says, is there a connection between Kali and the ancient Moors? No. Nope, only in the sense that she's the mother of all people. So no, there's no ethnic, because as it turns out, Hela, which is the Norse goddess of the underworld, even though, you know, when we look at depictions of her, like here, you know, she's, the depictions I have of her is of a, you know, your typical Nordic princess. But it's very clear that in the mythology she is the same. She is black. Black or dark blue, which is exactly the same as Kali. You know, and you know, we could go on and on about the coincidence that these two, you know, at this point in time, very different cultures and religions have the same aspect to her. She's seen as dark or black. But that has nothing to do with actual ethnic skin color. It's like, you know, there are racists in the heathen population who say, well, Thor has red hair, therefore he's a white man. But you also find thunder gods in Chinese mythology also have red hair. And Chinese people do not, you know, naturally have red hair. So it's got nothing to do with ethnicity. It is symbolic of the nature of her. She represents darkness. She represents emptiness. She represents the power that is within the emptiness. So, to answer your question, thank you for asking. Okay. How can we make a basic altar for rituals? Again, Dean, that depends on who you're worshiping. You know, again, a basic altar, for, you know, I mean, a basic altar is an altar. You know, if you're just wanting to figure out something basic, then follow your instinct. Because your instincts are probably going to be right. You're probably going to find that as you're putting things together, you know, this happens all the time when I look at people's charts and I tell them what to do, and here's how to worship this god or goddess, and here's how to do this. You know, at some point I'll hear them chuckle on the other end of the line because they'll say, that's exactly how I imagined it. So I'm like, yeah, I'm just telling you what your instincts already know. So, you know, basic altar for rituals, follow your instincts. If you want to get real serious about it, find somebody to help you do that. Oh, CERN in Switzerland. That's the particle collider. So Travis Cup was asking why do they have Kali out front? Well, you have to ask them. I mean, I don't know what their thought process is. But a lot of people will see Kali as the goddess of destruction and creation and all of that. So I can only assume that that's what the significance of that is. Okay, so all right, let's take a look at Hela. And let's talk a little bit about her. So, you know, look at, I only have one picture of her here. So let's just take a look at that picture of her as she's next to Kali. So you see there, that's a pretty idealized version of her. When you look at the mythology surrounding her, she's actually, again, pretty frightening. She is black or dark blue, and I don't know if she's naked or not. I think she might be naked. I'm not sure. But she is seen as being half young woman and half rotting corpse. So a lot of people will have her as, like, you know, half of her will be a skeleton and the other half will be human. But for me, I prefer the idea of rotting corpse, that's more difficult for us to look at. You know, because once the bones, you know, there's just the bones left and all the flesh is rotted away, then we can pick up the bones and play with them. But you don't want to touch like a rotting corpse. It's you know, it's really frightening and disgusting and uncomfortable and all that. So she is presenting the same kind of thing as Kali, in that, you know, what is said about Kali is that when you are attached to your karmas, to your, you know, those things that are not helpful for you, then that's how you see her. You see her in that very frightening form. So the same is true for Hela, is that, you know, when you first go to hell, one of the things you have to get over is the stumbling block. So there's all these things in the mythology there that you have to get through. There's the Hound of Hell. His name is Garm, and he is his name is one of the translations for his name is Rag. So you can see the connection there, blood and rag and all that, and the mourning, the loss of a child, the loss of all of your desires. These are the things that you're experiencing, you know, when, according to the Norse tradition, when you die, if you die in battle, in quotes, you go to the Hall of the Chosen and you get to be with Odin and his warriors, or you get to be with the Freya and the Valkyries. And that, of course, has to do with living your life without regret, living your life fearlessly, living your life in every moment in complete alignment with your deepest joys and taking action on them and being willing to die. To, you know, if you have a choice between, here, I'll give you a good life, or you can live in your integrity in this moment and die. The warrior says, well, I you know, being outside of my integrity is death, so I'm going to stay, you know, if you have to kill my body, so be it, but I'm going to stay in alignment with my soul. When you die in that way, meaning you've lived your life fearlessly, you have no more regrets, you have no desires, you've fulfilled all of your desires, then you get to go to the Hall of the Chosen. You become enlightened. You achieve moksha, liberation, however you want to look at it. And in the Norse tradition, if you die of illness or old age, then you get to go to the underworld and you get to spend some time with Hela. And then in the underworld, you face all of those unresolved desires, those regrets, those unresolved karmas, and then you will want to come back. You will want to come back because you will want to fulfill your desires. You will realize that you have regrets, that you have desires that you haven't fulfilled, and you will ask to be reincarnated. This is really important because nobody forces you to reincarnate. There is no being in the universe that tells you you have to go back. You know, they might suggest to you, you know, you're not done. Why don't you consider going back? When you're ready, let me know. But that's, you know, but it's nobody ever decides to go back and hates it. Nobody's forced into it. So we have to get rid of that idea. You know, when you know, the idea of praying for liberation, like, oh, please liberate me from this cycle of rebirth. It's just such a victim mentality. And I know that's big in a lot of, you know, especially, you know, mundane Hinduism. There's a lot of Hindus out there praying to be released. But what they should be doing, in my opinion, is to be asking, show me what my deepest desires are so that I can fulfill them, so I can be happy. Because once you achieve your happiness, then you will say, yeah, I did that human thing. That was a lot of fun. I'll go back if you want, but I think I've got everything I wanted out of it. And then the universe says, no, if you got everything you need, let's move on to the next one. And then you will seek out, you'll have other desires that can't be fulfilled in the human realm, but can only be fulfilled in other realms of existence. And then you will move on to that. So that's important to understand, that everything that we do, including rebirth, is a choice. Nothing is forced upon us. And the goddess in this form is really, really here to help us. In fact, you know, one of the things that's really important to understand, I suppose this is true of all of the gods, but when we're talking about Hela, I can tell you from my experience with her that she is the most committed to human beings of all of the gods. The same is true with Loki, by the way. You know, according to Norse mythology, Loki is her father. And Loki, even though he's the one that brings Ragnarok, he's the one that leads the armies of Surt, the armies of destruction, the giants and the trolls and all of that. And he leads this army to fight against the celestial deities and brings about the destruction of this universe. He is doing that because he is completely, totally devoted to human beings and their evolution. And so when it comes to the point where the only thing left to do now is to bring complete transformation, then he will break loose of his bonds under the earth and he will lead the armies of destruction. But he's doing it completely out of his love for the human race. So Hela is also that she is so devoted to human beings. In fact, when I visited her, I should say I was given permission to visit her. She allowed me to go see her. The experience that I had is that she is the last wall, and she is a mirror as well. She's this darkness, but she's the last wall of awareness. And if you were capable of going past her, which you're not, but if you were capable of going past her, you would be in a place where human awareness cannot survive. And so she literally encases and protects human awareness. She is that last barrier. And so when we get to the end of that, that's when we see things, you know, truly see everything for as it is. And being that she is a mirror, when you get there, what you are going to see at first is all of the things that you dislike about yourself, the things that you hate about yourself, all the things that you're in denial of, all of the projections that you have, you know, the fears that you project onto other people, the fears that you project onto the world, onto this matrix we call three-dimensional existence. She's going to be that mirror, and that's what you're going to see. So at first, that's what you're going to see of yourself. And, you know, I've said this before, you know, a lot of people, you know, hell, you know, by the way, the word hell comes from the ancient Germanic word for the underworld. It was co-opted by the Christians. It was stolen by the Christians and meant to represent the Christian eternal place of torture and punishment. That's not at all what it is. Having said that, there are places in the underworld that can be hell, as you know, in the quote-unquote the Christian term. It can be a place of torment, but only because, imagine if you're going into a room that is a complete mirror, and if you are projecting, as you're coming into the underworld, you're bringing with you all of your self-hatred, your self-sabotage, your insecurities, your fears, your anger, your whatever it is. That is, you're now projecting that. There's nothing to hide. You go into a room that's a mirror. All you see projected around you is that. And so that is because Hela, among all of the gods, she's so strong. She is so strong and so loving and so completely accepting of you that she'll be there with you. In fact, you are there, because that mirror, if we're using that same analogy, if that room, that mirror is her. She's literally surrounding you and encasing you while you experience your own projections. And the idea is that she knows that you have to go through that. You have to, you know, if you go to the underworld to punish yourself or whatever it is, you've got to do that, and she has to let you do it. She knows that's the only way that you will heal, is that you've got to get all those projections out. And so unlike me and you, if we were to see somebody living like that, if we were to see somebody in that kind of torment, we would want to shake up and go, hey, hey, wake up, wake up, wake up. This isn't real. It's all illusion. It's okay. You know, you're a good person. You know, we would want to talk them out of those really uncomfortable feelings, but all we would be doing is prolonging the inevitable. And so Hela is the only being in the universe that can tolerate seeing all of that. If you want to call it your sins, whatever you want to call it. She's the only being that's able to tolerate that without any agenda. That's what I love about her. She has no agenda. She doesn't judge anybody for anything. If you need to beat yourself up for 1 trillion years, she will stay there. Completely 100%. You know, like those people, when they're listening to you as they talk, you can just tell they're just completely with you. You know, they're not really intense, they're not bored, they're not judging, they're just completely there with you, you know, as people say, holding that space for you. That's what she does. And after however many millennia that you need to beat yourself up, when you're ready to let go of it, then she's there. And she will reflect what you truly are, your true soul. Eventually what will happen is that then what will be reflected back to you is the light of your eternity. And then she becomes this beautiful, young, virgin queen princess. Because she's reflecting back to you your soul. By the way, this is what relationships are all about. You know, we initially go after relationships because we're attracted to somebody physically, and then we stay with them because they make us feel good and all of that. But eventually you run into, you know, again, that's all your projection. You know, again, you're projecting onto them what it is you want to, whatever. Your ego experience of yourself. And it usually takes about 6 months. And then you start to see that, oh, there's actually a human being on the other side of my projection. And then you start to see the person for who they truly are. And what a true partner does in a romantic relationship is that they have an awareness that you are projecting onto them. Your fears, your pain, your whatever it is. And they say, you know, when you make a commitment to somebody, what you're saying is, I'm committed to being that blank mirror for you. I'm committed, you know, we say in sickness and in health, you know, blah, blah, blah. What we're saying is that I'm here to accept you exactly as you are, whatever that is. But there's another thing that we are required to do in relationships, is that we reflect back to them their true self, their true divine self. So this is something that's really important. You know, I can say this definitely is true for men, that, you know, when they talk about having found that one woman that makes them feel like they can, you know, whatever, take down the moon, or, you know, king of the world, or whatever it is. What they're saying is that they found a partner who is able to reflect back to them their true soul. So when they look in their partner's eyes, they see the best in themselves, and it empowers them to go and be and do whatever it is that they want to do. So this is what Hela does for the soul. So she really is the entity that is going to have the most deep and intimate connection with you throughout eternity. You know, I'm able to talk through it without getting emotional, but normally when I talk about these goddesses, especially Mother Hela, it's hard for me to talk. I get so choked up I can't talk. But for whatever reason, I'm able to do that today. So there are the two goddesses there. That's what they represent. I'll take a look and see if there are any questions. Before I do that, let's do a little bit of business, and then we'll take some questions. Alright, so I think I saw some questions here. We've got a few more people who have logged in. So let's see, did I see a question? Is there a reason for the color of the skin, either symbolic or hidden meaning? Yeah, I think I addressed that. Yeah, again, the skin color has nothing to do with ethnicity. You know, we're talking about we're talking about spiritual entities. They don't have skin, so there's no such thing as, you know, skin color ethnicity among the gods. So whatever they have is representative of something. So yeah, her skin color. Again, both of them, both Kali and Hela, both have black skin, or dark blue skin, which represents the emptiness, represents the darkness of the pure feminine. You know, beginning of the universe, there was, you know, like everybody says, there was darkness. So even the birth of the stars, which is the first thing that was brought into physical manifestation, was the stars. Even before that, there was just this emptiness of pure potential. This is why Kali is such a powerful goddess when you work with her. And why she's a goddess of Kundalini, because again, a lot of people don't know the difference between Kundalini and prana, or life force energy, or chi. And these are two different things. Kundalini has to do with the psychological self-awareness. And the reason why it's a fire is because we have to burn through it. So Kundalini, people talk about a Kundalini awakening and my Kundalini. Well, that doesn't necessarily mean because you have a lot of Kundalini energy, that doesn't mean you've achieved anything. It means you've got a lot of karma. You've got a lot of unresolved psychological stuff that you're burning through. Ideally, you want to get to the place where you've burned through it all. So, and of course, when we're going through psychological, emotional experiences, we experience a lot of stuff, both positive and negative and all that. It just means you've got stuff you got to get through. Okay, so I read that Kali is a goddess of destruction. She's a god, she is a goddess of destruction, but she's not a goddess of destruction in that, like, she's the devil coming to destroy you. She is a goddess of transformation. You cannot have transformation without destroying the old things. But she's actually a goddess of life. She's a goddess of rebirth. She's here to destroy those things within you that are holding you back. So that's the only thing that's destructive about her. However, like I said, when we're on the other end of that, when we're experiencing her, go back, if you're just tuning in now, go back and watch from the beginning, because I talk about what all those things mean, what all the symbolism of Kali is. Her fierceness is that she's coming to destroy the negative limitations within you that are really actually destroying you. She's coming to destroy the things that are destroying you. And we don't realize it, we're attached to it, and so as she comes towards us, we see her in this horrible form. We see her as a goddess of destruction, a goddess of death. But it is only our ego, our illusions that are dying. She's actually here to give us life. Oh, somebody asked a really great question. Juby Bob asks, why did Hela not let Balder come back? Why make everything cry for him? Very good question. So in case you're not familiar with the mythology surrounding Balder, in the Norse pantheon, Balder is the god of the soul. He's a solar god, a sun god, but he's male, and his name means bald, which means bold, means fearless. And he had this superpower, if you will. Nothing could harm him. And so what the gods used to do for fun is that they would put Balder in a corner and they would do things like, hurl spears at him, or fire arrows at him, or throw rocks at him, or, swords, or whatever it was. And of course everything would bounce right off him, and nothing would bother him, because he was this bright, shining deity, and everybody loved being around him. He just had this warmth about him, and this love, and this joy. He represents the soul. He represents, when I say the whole reason for us living is to live in alignment with our deepest soul desire, that's Balder. That's exactly what Balder is. And so, anyway, so he was beloved by all of the gods. Now, the mother goddess, the queen of heaven, Frigga, which comes from the same root word where in the Vedic they have Priya, which means beloved. It's the same word, Priya, Frigga, same word. It means beloved. Frigga is not Freja. Even though they sound the same, by the way, they're not the same. Freja comes from a completely different word for something else, but they sound similar. Anyway, Frigga, the goddess of love, the mother of heaven, she went around to everything in creation. So again, our ancestors believed in an animist universe, meaning that they believed that everything had a consciousness, had life within it, even rocks, trees, everything, moss, ideas, people, animals. Everything had a life in it. Everything had a consciousness to it. You know, our ancestors used to talk to trees. You know, that's the people now who are running the world who say, oh yeah, all that stuff is nonsense. Our ancestors used to talk to trees. Anyway, so Frigga goes to every single being in the universe and asks them, will you please make sure not to harm my son, Balder? And so everything in the universe agreed not to harm Balder, except for one. She didn't go to mistletoe. Frigga decided that mistletoe was too young to be able to make a vow. So this is interesting because this reveals the thought process of the pre-Christian Northern Europeans, is that they believed that a vow was for life. You know, that you had to make that you can't ask a child to make a vow because they're too young. So for whatever reason, she saw mistletoe as being too young, and so mistletoe was left out, and she figured, listen, I've told everything else except mistletoe, Balder's going to be fine. Now, she was telling this in the court in the hall of Asgard there. She was telling a handmaiden or somebody about this, and Loki was listening. And Loki heard that there is one being in the universe that can kill Balder, and that's mistletoe. So Loki goes to Balder's brother, whose name is translated as blindness, ignorance. Goes to his brother, to Balder's blind brother, and says, hey, how come you're not joining in the fun? All the gods are over there throwing rocks and hurling spears at Balder, and they're having a great time. It's really hilarious. Why don't you go do it? And he says, well, I can't see. And he says, hey, you know what? I will aim your arrow for you. And Balder's brother says, yeah, okay, that sounds like a great idea. So Loki takes a sprig of mistletoe, puts it on the end of the arrow, and then holds on to, I forget the guy's name now, the blind brother's name. Gets him to focus and aim right at Balder, and then, okay, let go. So out goes this arrow, by ignorance, and on it is mistletoe, and it pierces into Balder's skin and kills him. And so everybody's mourning now, because everybody loved being around the bright warmth, joy of the soul, because that's what he represents. Now, because he died, he has to go to the underworld. So he goes to the underworld, and what ends up happening is that Frigga is beside herself, the mother. This is her most beloved son, which means that, the soul is the most beloved thing to the mother goddess. This is why she's willing to, in the form of Kali and Hela, have us experience all these challenging things so that we can purify ourselves, get to our true essence. In any case, so Balder goes to the underworld, and he's down in the underworld now, and all the gods are sobbing. They are so upset. They miss Balder so much. And so Frigga sends an emissary to go and talk to Hela, and asks Hela, will you please let go of my son? He doesn't belong here. He needs to be with us. We miss him. I'm the mother of the universe. I'm the queen of heaven. Can you please let him go? And Hela says, if you can get every single being in the universe to mourn for him, I will release him. So Frigga says, no problem. So she goes to all of the beings in the universe and gets them to weep, and they all weep for Balder, except for one giantess. Her name translates as gratitude. Gratitude was the only being that refused to cry for Balder. And so, in the myth it says that it was Loki in disguise. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. It wouldn't surprise me, because Loki was the one that got the whole ball rolling anyway. Because why? Because the gods were not honoring the most precious thing in the universe, the soul of the universe. They took him as a party favor. They took him for granted. They didn't appreciate what they had. And this is one thing that Loki cannot stand. He can't stand it when people do not appreciate the divine, the sacred. So all of the tricks that Loki does, by the way, all of the negative things that he doesn't do it just for the sake of being a trickster or a mean person. His goal is always to get you to become aware of what is most important. He's all about getting you to live your life in your deepest joy. So when the gods did not appreciate what they had, then Loki created this whole thing. And so when Frigga comes to thanks, is how it's translated, thok, thanks, gratitude. Gratitude says, I'm not going to cry for him. The meaning is that Loki isn't mourning him because when Loki had him in his presence, he completely 100% appreciated him. So that's the idea. We mourn when we lose people. Oh, so-and-so is out of my life, so-and-so died, and we mourn. I'm going to miss them, but that's because we're sad. We're sad for our selfishness. I'm not judging it, it's just what it is. But Loki is saying, now you appreciate the soul because you don't have it around. So that's why Balder didn't get to come back, is because he represents the other aspect, which is our soul, which is underneath all of this flesh. So we are constantly trying to get back to our soul. We are trying to get back in connection with our deepest soul. That's why I'm constantly saying to you that the whole reason for your living is to operate from your greatest joy. When you don't know what you're supposed to do in life, what you're supposed to do for a living, go after your greatest joy. That's why you should be willing to die to stay in that place. If the world comes along and says, okay, well, let's take you out of your integrity, but I'll make you a millionaire. You should have, ideally, you, me, we all should have the understanding that, no, I want to be connected to my soul. That's the most important thing. You can't take that away from me. But you can walk away from your integrity. You can do it, and that is the lesson here. Every time that you go through difficulties and you walk out of yourself, it's because you were led away by something shiny that you thought was going to be better than what your soul gives you. So as I say, throughout your life, you are going to continuously, at various stages in your life, sometimes more intense than others, you're going to be confronted with a choice between following your deepest soul desire, following your deepest joy, or taking an action that will make other people happy. And when you take an action in order to make other people happy, either to be a good person, or because you want their love, or because you want their money, or because you want people to accept you, or whatever it is, then you walk out of your integrity, which is really what dying is. You walk out of your integrity and you then get disconnected from that joy, which is your soul. That's why there are so many rich people. I mean, I could name a few, I won't, but there are just so many rich, famous people who are so miserable and so sad and so sick and die from overdoses or kill themselves or whatever. So all the stuff that we think is going to make us happy, is not anywhere near as pleasurable as actually just living from your soul, from your deepest soul desire. Anyway, so that was the answer to your question. So Dean Nevins is asking me, do I know if Hades from Greek mythology serves the same purpose as Hela? Well, I'm not a real expert in Greek mythology, but obviously there's a connection. I can't answer that intelligently because I'm just not well versed enough in Hades, but I would imagine most likely so. What is the difference between the North Vedic and South Vedic astrological charts? Well, there are different kinds of charts within India. There are different kinds of astrology within India. If what you're asking is what I think it is It's just simply a different representation. One of them is a box that goes in a clockwise fashion, and another one is a diamond that goes in a counterclockwise fashion. Okay. Okay, so again, looking for the questions. Can you, meaning can I change your settings? I can't change your settings. If you're asking, can you change your settings? Yes, I'm sure if you go to the help section, you can find out how to do that, how to get the notifications. I can't do it though. I can't do that for you. I got nothing to do with that. You have to do that. So go into YouTube and just go to the help section and just ask how to do that. I'm sure there's an answer for it somewhere. All right, so all right, again, looking for the questions. Do I see one? Altered Ego 0622 says, can Goddess Kali be called up to provoke necessary destruction? For instance, to stop an enemy or to bring about necessary change. Okay, so I would say that that's coming from a rather limited perspective. I think that's a misunderstanding. First off, if you have an enemy in your life, you created it. You attracted it. So it doesn't make sense to get somebody else to fight your battles for you. Okay, that's number one. So you're looking at it from the perspective that the universe does things to you, that people can do things to you. I don't know if you're new to my channel or not, but if you are, I recommend watching more of my videos so you can get an idea of my beliefs about this. So everything is your own projection. Everything is your own creation. So if you have an enemy in your life, it's because you have created that. And so what Kali is going to do, if you call on Kali to destroy somebody else, or to fight against somebody else, or to cause destruction on somebody else, you're only bringing it on yourself, because whatever it is that you see in that person is you. So that's something you need to be aware of. You know, this is what the Nazis did. You know, Nazis were, unfortunately, they co-opted the symbol for transformation, which we know as the Philfot or the swastika. It's an ancient Indo-European symbol. In fact, it's all over the world. The Navajos used it, the Hopis used it, and it means transformation through destruction. So you're talking about destruction, it's transformation through destruction. It's one of the symbols of the lightning god. When they wore that symbol on wherever they wore it, carried it around, what they were doing is they were asking the universe to come and destroy their ignorance and their limitation and their hatred, their self-hatred, you know, which of course is what racism is. You're projecting your own self-hatred onto other people. So when you start using those things, you know, trying to call down destruction on somebody else, it's only going to be coming at you. You know, it's going to be, you're the one that's going to get destroyed. And look what ended up happening, you know. Interestingly enough, when you look at the history, they had multiple opportunities to win that war, and, you know, Hitler would make a stupid mistake, or somebody would make just a really stupid rookie mistake that would open the door for the Allies to come in, and that's why we won. And I think it's because they were asking for the thunder god to bring destruction upon them and to bring awareness to them. And, you know, anyway, so I could go on and on about that. So yeah, you can call upon her if you want, but you're only going to be bringing it on yourself. Instead, what you want to do is you want to ask Kali, Mother Kali, please reveal to me how I have created this negativity in my life. The closest thing, you know, if you're really looking for this, the closest thing to get rid of negative people in your life is to work with the thunder god, to work with Thor, and to work with the Thurisaj rune, because when you work with the Thurisaj rune, your boundaries will get cleaned up, and then people will end up leaving your life. But that's a whole different thing. So again, you got to change your focus. Everything's coming from you, not the other way around. Hi, Alan. Yes, I've already gone through the distinctions between Hela and Kali, so when you get a chance, go back and watch it from the beginning. I talked a lot about it. All right, so again, no more questions for me. I'm going to take a little bit of a break. I'm going to kind of decide where I want to go from here, but let's just take a little bit of a break. So again, what I want to focus on here is what these goddesses of death and destruction, I say that in quotes, what these deities really are all about. This is, you know, I want to avoid the superlatives because, you know, we're just looking at different aspects of the same thing. But this is, you know, somebody who's willing to come to you in this guise. Somebody who's willing to bring you the bitter medicine that you need in order to heal is somebody that loves you. You know, you really know your true friends. Your true friends are somebody that will tell you the truth, even if you don't want to hear it. And that is what these goddesses do. And so what it really comes down to is everything is trying to give you compassion. One of the things that comes from working with Saturn or being on the other end of Saturn lessons is that when you come out the other side, you have an understanding and you have a tolerance and you have compassion. So, you know, people are asking how to worship Kali and Hela. And one of the here's one way. Here's a ritual that anybody can do. You know, I said earlier that if you really want to do a ritual to a deity, because I know the science of how to do that based on somebody's chart, I just don't give out, oh, here's the mantra for Kali or here's the ritual for Kali, because it's different for everybody. So that's why I recommend getting a reading from me first. But here's something that everybody can do. Give. Because what Saturn does is that Saturn wants you to give. Saturn, one of the ways that you make Saturn happy, Kali, Hela, is giving to the poor, giving to the sick, volunteering, you know, at you know, soup kitchens, or going and visiting old folks' homes, or, you know, whatever. Because the things that represent Saturn are death, illness, old age, poverty, misery, sadness. And so go and give to those people. Now, you don't have to do it officially, just in general. When you see somebody that needs kindness. Again, let me tell you the difference. You know, when I'm having difficulty, and if I'm having sadness, you know, the last thing I want is somebody to come and try and fix me. Turn that frown upside down, mister. It'll be better tomorrow. Come on, buck up. Don't be so sad. I hate it when people try and talk me out of my feelings. I really hate that. You know, it's rude. Because what people are saying a lot of times is, I'm uncomfortable with your feelings, so get out of them. You know, it's really not helpful at all. It's really actually quite judgmental. But they're doing it with a smile on their face. Now, sometimes people do need to be cheered up and all of that if they're coming from a selfless place. But lots of times the best thing that you can do for somebody who's having a tough time is just sit there with them. You know? Somebody's in a lot of pain, you just sit there and hold their hand. Just don't say a word. Just be there with them. These are the kinds of things that make Saturn happy. These are the kinds of things that make Kali happy. Yeah. So, anyway, so that's it for me on this. I think I've kind of run out of all the things that I want to say. I'll check and see if there are any questions. This is your last chance. If you have any questions about anything, please feel free to ask, because now's your chance before I go off of the air for today. So I'm not seeing any questions here. So I'll give it a couple more minutes, see if there's something else that I want to say. Wait, I just saw something come up there. Okay, here's a question. Dean Nevin says, what planets or deities will help with art and creativity? Well, again, that is something that depends on your chart. Let me give you an example in my chart. A planet that is working to help me in terms of writing and communicating is Mars. Now, Mars is a warrior planet, but because of where Mars is placed and because of the other planets and the other relationships, if I want to be a better writer, then I worship Mars. Now, that may not be true for somebody else. So again, to best answer that question, again, I've got to look at your chart. You know, again, that's my job. If I know better, I have to tell you the truth. But if I just throw out generalities, then that might be the worst thing for you. Having said that, on a general level, Venus is probably the most well associated with arts and creativity, but it could also be the Sun, because Leo is the actor, and also creativity as well. The 5th house is creativity, which is the original house of Leo. Mercury, if you need to have an intellect, you know, if you need to be able to think clearly. The Moon is also very important for creativity. Because the moon is the emotions. It allows you to see things objectively. So, you know, again, I wasn't really able to answer your question specifically. Do I know of any people practicing spirituality or shamanism through art? Sure. Basically, anybody who's doing any creative anything is practicing shamanism. Creativity is one of the main ways that shamans are trained. In fact, I've shared about this before. I found this out a while ago. But I was looking at druids, even though I'm not a druid. But I was really interested in that, and we don't know what their training was, but we know that druids went through a 20-year training practice. And throughout those 20 years, they learned storytelling, they learned drama, they learned art, they learned singing, they learned music, they learned herbs, they learned magic, and they learned philosophy. So they had to go through a very specific training. And then when they've got through that 20 years, then they're a druid. And then when I looked at what it was, I don't remember where it was, but somebody laid out exactly and in what order. And I went, wow, that's exactly what I went through. So a lot of my training was as an actor. But I also painted for a while, and I played instruments for a while. I did all that. And the point is that whether people realize it or not, anybody who is an artist is a shaman. Okay? So I don't know if I answered your question. All right. Free Willy is asking, should I be concerned about having both the sun and Saturn in Aries. Again, I don't know if your chart is, if we're talking about your Western chart or your Vedic chart, because they're very different. And so I don't, if that's your Western chart, I don't know that your Sun and Saturn are actually in Aries. Secondly, I have to look at your chart. I have to look at all the things to be able to tell you what, how it's going to affect you. But you shouldn't be concerned about anything. It is what it is. Life is what it is. Western. So Free Willy says it's Western. So the thing is that Western astrology and Vedic astrology not only are different in multiple ways, they also measure the sky differently. So it's very possible that Sun and Saturn may not be in Aries. So again, I have to look at your chart. If you want me to look at your chart, go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. I'll be happy to answer that question for you. Joey wants to play, says, are you still accepting apprentices? I believe that I am. You need to go to thunderwizard.com and you'll see all the various ways that you can subscribe. A subscription, there's the basic subscription where you can take a look at the private videos that I upload 4 times a month. And then you can go up to a higher level, and I think there's 1 or 2 slots there. By the way, I know that some people change their subscription, like at the end of the month and the beginning of the month. You got to be careful with that because, I personally don't care, but you got to be careful with that because somebody could sneak in underneath you and take your spot, if you're doing that. So go to thunderwizard.com and see if there are slots left. I know there are some, and sign up for whatever subscription you want. By the way, that is the best way to contribute to this channel. The best way to support this work on this channel is to go to the Patreon page, which is thunderwizard.com, and subscribe at whatever level you want, because that's money that's going to come to me every month. The more subscriptions I get, the more time I can spend just doing this, because this is really what I want to do. Working and teaching and all that kind of stuff. Then I don't have to worry so much about trying to get the clickbait. As you can see, I'm putting a lot of clickbait on my channel because I want views. I need to get people to, more people coming onto the channel, so more word comes out there, blah, 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 everything goes up. So that's the best way to support this channel. All right. What are the main distinctions between planets, deities, elves, and spirit guides? I don't know how to answer that question. That's a hugely broad question. I know you a little bit, Alan, so I'm getting the sense that there's something you're trying to figure out. And it would be more helpful for me if you told me what it is you're trying to figure out than trying to because that's such a huge question. I don't think I'll actually answer the need that you have behind that question. So if you can, ask it again in such a way where I can really pinpoint on what it is you're trying to figure out. Influences versus guidance. Again, be more specific. What does that mean? Influences versus guidance. Yeah, why don't I take a short break and let Alan, if he wants to, he can further define that question. We'll just take a quick break here and then we'll see what we've got left. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, Keith Catalino says, what is your opinion on the Akashic record? Is it our soul in for something more or nothing more? I don't understand what you're asking. My opinion on the Akashic record, you know, again, that's a term that's thrown around by so many different people and used in so many different ways. So I first need to know, you know, where that's coming from. Is that coming from a certain teacher? And I need to know what they believed and all that kind of stuff. But my opinion on the Akashic record is, again, I go back to the way that I describe this is through my ethnic background, spiritual background, which is Wyrd, W-Y-R-D. So the Akashic record, if we're talking about some record that has a record of your destiny, past lives, and all that kind of stuff, what we're talking about is the web of Wyrd, which is what creates three-dimensional reality. We live in space-time. Space-time is made up of three aspects which we perceive as the past, the present, and the future. There is only actually just the present. There's nothing else. But as we live through the present, every single moment we are experiencing something. We have a thought, we have a feeling, we have a reaction to other people or incidences. Those thoughts, feelings, reactions, beliefs, actions become lodged in what we perceive to be the past. That's what whether they realize it or not, that's what people are saying when they use the word Akashic records. Akasha just means the heavens. So, but it's not like stored in the heavens. It's not like your destiny is stored on a parchment in the heavens somewhere. It's actually recorded in the fabric of the material universe. When you think, believe, act, react, have a feeling, commit to something, plan to do something, make an assumption about anything, it becomes lodged in the past. Then that becomes the blueprint which creates your future that you have to live out. So whether somebody's saying I've gone and accessed the Akashic records, it's just another way of talking about the same thing, but people get so caught up in the symbols they forget what the meaning is. So again, to tell you my opinion on it, I would have to know more about who it was and what they believed, and I'm sure we don't have time to get into that. Do I know anything about Huldras? I do. I'm willing to bet, though, that my understanding is different than yours. I don't, if I see this in your next question, I think you're coming up with some stuff that I would connect to things like Western magic or that kind of stuff, which I think is kind of superficial stuff. So I don't, whatever people would say about them, I don't do things like summon lower entities or spirits in order to do some kind of magic. Any kind of, I don't know if this is what you're talking about, but it's getting me talking about it anyway. When I talk about using shamanism to manifest and change reality, I'm not talking about mundane magic. Mundane magic, again, in order to understand this, we have to understand concepts having to do with what your assumption is about the nature of the universe. So one of the best ways for me to describe this is to use the symbol of the matrix. When people talk about living in a matrix. If your assumption is that the matrix is this empty computer program, then that's going to limit every other conclusion that you make about your reality. So when I'm talking about doing things, weirding, the word I use is weirding, as opposed to just magic. Weirding is when you actually step outside of the matrix and you change reality with the understanding of the process I just described about what weird is. then you can change your reality, you can shift realities, you can change things, but nobody will ever know you did anything. So when somebody is using some kind of, like trying to summon some kind of a spirit or an entity in order to use them, they're operating from within the matrix. They never leave it. It's not really true magic. It's just, at best, an illusion, and more often than not, it gets you trapped deeper and deeper and deeper into limitation. So if you really want to practice magic, I'm not saying Facts Night that that's what you're doing, but anybody who does, I would recommend going past that. But in order to do that, you have to live in a state where you are, first and foremost, you have surrendered to this power, surrender to the goddess. And maybe I can talk about another story about the goddess. You surrender to this energy, and when you're completely surrendered to it, then you master it. So let's talk about this. So Kali, the goddess Kali, is connected to a bunch of other goddesses in Hindu mythology, which are basically different emanations of the same mother goddess. And so in one of the mythologies, the mother goddess, she decided to go down to earth and take a bath. So she went down and she went to, deep into the forest, and went to this lake or this pond or whatever it was, and stripped naked and decided to bathe in the forest. And she's just in her beautiful self as the mother goddess that's seen as this beautiful virgin maiden. And so one of the demons sees her. It's not really a demon, but we'll save that for another time. One of the demons sees her. Now this demon happens to be connected, if you translate his name, it has to do with ego. And he sees her and he decides that he wants her. So he sends one of his messengers to tell the mother goddess, hey, the goddess ego, the demon ego over here, who is in control of the universe, wants to marry you. So you come with me. And she says, I can't. And then there's this whole back and forth of, if you don't come with me, I'll take you by force and all that kind of thing. And she says, if you can defeat me in battle, then I will marry you. So then this creates this whole battle. But the bottom line is, you find out that to defeat her in battle means to completely, totally surrender to her. And the man, and of course in this instance we're talking about a man, so the man that can completely surrender his ego and completely surrender himself to the feminine, then she will serve him. Then she will get on her knees and she will wash his feet and act like the good typical wife. But there's an understanding, he knows that she's controlling him, and he's happy to let her do it. By the way, that's what all men want. It's hard to believe, but that's what all men want. They want to find that one woman who is so strong, who is so pure within herself, that she has the ability again to reflect back what's best in him. And when he sees that, when he sees what's best in himself in her eyes, he will get on one knee. That's what getting on one knee signifies. That's why we've done that. Getting on one knee and say, will you please marry me? It's because that man realized that's his Shakti, that's his power. And so he has to submit himself to that power. And I used to talk about this, with my Taoist teacher. We also talked about the feminine is, he would use the word devious. Now, he didn't mean it in a negative way. He meant that the feminine surrounds the male, that the male is very, of course we know this is true physically. Men have a smaller corpus callosum, which is the membrane that connects the two halves of the brain. That's why men can only do one thing at a time. I'm one of those people. I can't do more than one thing at a time. And that's because, physically men need to hunt, and when they're hunting, they have to focus one thing at a time. Whereas females have a bigger corpus callosum. That's why women can be talking on the phone, cooking dinner, and bouncing a baby all at the same time, and then, you know, shout. They have an ability to just physically have a better ability to have both of the sides of the brain communicate with each other. So this gives the feminine the ability to not be so direct all the time. It can go around things. Again, I've shared this before. One of my girlfriends that I dated way back 20-something years ago, she was a woman who was born in the South, and she was very good at this. She was very devious, and I'd catch her doing it, and she'd say, "My mom always taught me. My mama always taught me, if you ever want a man to do something, you got to make him think it's his idea." And so the ideal woman is the woman who knows what is truly best for that man, and knows that he has a one-pointed ego. He can only do one thing at a time. She knows that he has a very fragile ego, and so she will guide him to make choices that is in his best interest and make him think it's his idea. That's what my teacher meant by devious. And all men are looking for that. But if they catch you doing it, they'll resent it. And the problem is when the feminine does that with an agenda. So this is why men say, "I hate women, they're so manipulative." What they're saying is that they've run into women who are using their natural devious nature, but they're doing it out of selfishness, which is always destructive. And then you'll be caught. But if you do it truly from wanting to do what is best for all, including yourself, then nobody will ever see that that's what you're doing, except those, other people who are doing it will wink and know what you're doing. But the person that you're trying to help will never see it coming. And they'll think they're the one making the decision. So going back to the goddess, in order to really do magic, to really be able to influence reality, that's the relationship you have to have. You submit yourself energetically. You surrender to the power, this enormous power of the feminine that is bigger and larger and more powerful than anything in the universe. All of the gods are subservient and come from the mother. All of them do. And when you surrender yourself and trust this power, then when you are truly doing it without any illusion, which we would call ego, then that energy serves you. And then you can control that energy. But once you get out of alignment with yourself, and you're no longer operating for your deepest joy, your truest desire, you step out of your integrity, then the goddess says, "I'm not going to have anything to do with that." And then she lets go. And then you can't control her. So she submits to you when you submit to her. That's what this dance is all about. And that's my limited understanding, the best I can do, trying to explain that. So let's see here. All right. All right, so I think I answered the question about that. Let's see here. Magic is not lower, but different, lower interest. Yeah, so, we're probably going to have some disagreements on that. I'm telling you from my experience, I've done both. I have done things with energy that should not be possible. And I can tell you from experience that there is a level that is greater than that. But you have to, you're not going to see it, you're not going to be even willing to go there until you've played it all out and realized, trying to play with things inside of the matrix is a dead end. And that's what I'm using the term magic. It's trying to change things from within the matrix. And all you're doing is you're just moving things around within the matrix. True magic is when you're outside of it, and then nobody ever sees it. Nobody ever knows you did anything. And you can't take credit for it. And also, there's only one true place to do that is when, again, you're operating from your soul desire. You can get caught up in magic. You can get completely, totally pulled out of your awareness, pulled out of your integrity. and get. I've seen, and again, I'm telling you from experience. I've seen people do it. Really, really powerful magicians that have no clue. They're so miserable. They're so unhappy. So anyway, all right. So going back to the questions here again. I'm looking for questions. I don't see any questions. All right. So there we go. All right. So I think that's it. Again, I'll try it one more time. I'll give us just a few seconds break, and if there are any more questions, I'll answer them. Otherwise, I will come back with some final thoughts for today. Okay, so let's see if there's any other questions left here. Facts Knight says, if you want to, are you able to see Odin again or other Norse deities? I'm not quite sure I understand why you're asking that question. If I wanted to, I mean, see, here's the thing. I don't need to see them. I'm experiencing them all the time. I'm in communication with them. I'm connected to them. I feel them. You know, who cares about what the experience is? Who cares? What difference does that make? Having said that, I understand why somebody might want that. But, you know, also, you know, throwing that out, I had seeing Hela and having my experience with Hela was one of the most profound experiences in my life. You know, I'm not doing it now, but sometimes when I start talking about it, I start to break down into tears because it was just such an amazing, incredible experience. Having said that, it's not something I would want to do every day. It's, you know, there's a reason why people, you know, be careful what you're playing around with here. But the other aspect is that, you know, if somebody really needs to experience the deities, they will. So, but again, it's the, you know, again, when we're talking about these things like magic and all that stuff, like it's, you know, to me, the reason I'm kind of having this wince on my face is because it again goes back to it reminds me of what we were talking about earlier. If you were on listening to me. And I was explaining about how Balder ended up going to the underworld, which is that he was in Asgard with all of the gods, and the gods, because he was invincible, the gods would have fun. They'd drink mead and they'd get, you know, plastered, and then they would throw rocks at him and throw bombs at him and throw things at him just to see things explode off his chest like Superman. And Loki hated that so much that he created the whole scenario that put Balder in the underworld because the gods did not respect and appreciate what they had. So treating the gods like some kind of circus act or, a ride or some kind of experience to have. I'm not saying that you can't do it or that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that kind of misses the point. They're not just what you see. They're, the electromagnetic force, for example, is something that you're experiencing all the time. Every time you touch your hands, the electromagnetic force, which is the god Thunar, is preventing your hands from going together. So the gods are all here all the time. It's just a question of, and let me say something else too. The gods are not there for us to gain power from them. The gods are reflections of things that are within ourselves, and our experience with them is really about finding our deepest joy and our happiness. They're not things that we need, necessarily to use just to have an experience or to be distracted from ourselves. The idea is to go deeper into yourself. So having said that, I don't know. I mean, can I do it again? I'm not thinking in those terms. Can I do it again? I'm sure I will have other experiences as time goes on. Okay, so going forward, looking for the questions. Okay, Alan H. All right, there's not a question here, but I know I think if I'm seeing this right, I think we're bumping into some intellectual issues. I associate submission with giving up something valuable, but can see that's not your point. This is key to one of my limitations. Yeah, well, I would say submission is giving up something valuable, but what's wrong with that? The only time that that's a problem is if your assumption, we have to look at your assumption again. If your assumption is that when you give up something valuable, you're not going to get it back, then that's a problem. But again, that's coming from fear. So that's an assumption that's coming from fear. So again, I know a little bit about you, Alan. We would want to go deeper into what was the experience you had of when you gave something up and didn't get something back in return. So this is what's the difference between humans and the universe, the gods, is that the gods, you can trust them. You can trust them with everything that you have. You're going to get back what you give. This is what sacrifice is. All sacrifices, worship involves sacrifices to the gods. And people did that. They would slaughter really valuable animals. It's not the same today. We go to the store and we get a chicken off for a couple bucks. To sacrifice a goat or a sheep or a cow or something, that would have been, the same as probably tens of thousands of dollars. And they're doing it and sacrificing it to the deity in order to get something back even more. So I would recommend looking at what are the fear-based assumptions that are connected to that reaction to it. Anyway, again, just going off of what I see here. That's the best I can do. All right, so there we go. All right, so no more questions, so I think we're going to leave it at that. So I'll leave it at that, too, again, that this is, when it comes to the Saturn deities, the Saturn goddesses, you are going to have an experience of sacrifice. You're going to have an experience of losing something that here's the thing, you perceive that it's of value when it's not. It's some kind of protection mechanism. There's maybe some fear involved, some illusion about something you think you need, that the mother says, all that is a splinter. Let me get that splinter out. That's going to cause an infection. You don't want to hold on to that. You want to get rid of that. And so it'll feel like a death. But it's dying to a false idea of yourself if if there's a part of you that is attached to certain things or ideas or whatever in your life, and those things really are not helpful for you, then that's a false idea of who you are. It's a limited idea of who you are. And here's the thing, it's like, again, I'll use relationships as an example. I get a lot of people calling me on the phone and they want me to look at, psychically look at a relationship issue. And they'll ask me about some guy that they're in love with and who is, cheating on her, or, he's married or something like that. And so after a while, I look at him and then I start to say, listen, why do you want this in your life? Because this is obviously a problem for you. You want to be in love. You want somebody who will be there for you, and you're dating a married guy. Why are you wasting your time with that? And then they'll go, okay, well, never mind about that. Do you see somebody else coming into my future? And then I will say, well, what do you mean? Well, if somebody better comes along, I will go be with them. And then I say, well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. Because when you are emotionally attached to somebody, even if it's just an idea in your head, even if it's somebody you haven't seen in 3 years, if that's the guy that you're in love with and you want to be with that guy, the universe says, oh, she's in a relationship. Let's make sure nobody else comes into her life. So you've got to get rid of that guy. You got to dump him. You got to tell that married guy, if that's not what you want, you got to tell that married guy that you want something they can't give, and you're going to break up with them. So that's a sacrifice. You got to let go of it. You got to let go of what you don't need, what might be giving you what you think you want at the moment, but in reality is just keeping you further and further away from your true joy and your true happiness. So again, this isn't about being righteous. It's not about being good. It's not about being spiritual. It's not even about, being enlightened or perfected or any of that other nonsense. It is about being happy, about being fulfilled. That is what your whole life should be focused on. And understand, again, I just used the example of somebody having an affair with a married man. That doesn't make you happy. So people, again, want to ask, well, what if, drinking a six-pack every 2 hours makes me happy? It's like, well, that doesn't make you happy. You might get some short-term distraction from it, but that's not making you happy. When you go after what truly makes you happy, you will elevate everybody. All consciousness in the universe will be elevated, but especially people in your life will be elevated. That may also mean that you may disappoint some people and you may lose some people. Some people may reject you because they don't want you to do that, because then they can't relate to you on their whatever narcissistic, lower vibrational, whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, I'm not saying that following your deepest desires is going to be without challenges. You will be forced many times to make a choice between what you think is making you happy, or what you think other people want you to do, and what truly makes you happy. And when you do what truly makes you happy, you will act in integrity toward everybody in your life. Okay? So have I made that clear? All right, so again, that's it for now. I will, just out of habit, double check to see if there are any questions that I want to answer. And if not, I will move on. Keith Catalano says it's hard to go from monotheism to many-theism. Well, then you don't have to go from monotheism. Just get rid of Jehovah. Jehovah is the ego. People who worship Jehovah are worshiping the ego. So do you want to worship your own ego? Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Go back and read Genesis. If you have a hard time letting go of the Bible, go back and read what Jehovah says to Moses. Let me just give you what I remember. He says to him, he gives him the 10 Commandments and all that, and he says to Moses, thou shalt have no other gods before me. Do not worship them in the sky. Do not worship them in the water. Do not worship them under the earth. Do not worship any graven image. He tells him all the things he can't do. And then he says, I don't know if I'm doing this in the right order, but at some point Jehovah says to him, just makes me laugh every time. He says, if you love me, you will follow all of my commandments. Okay, so I kind of understand that. And then he goes to say, and if you do not follow all of my commandments, you hate me. So those are the only two choices you have with Jehovah. You can either do every single thing he tells you to do, and if you only miss one of those commandments, then you hate him. Then he goes on to say, and if you hate me, here are all the ways I'm going to punish you. I'm going to curse your children for 7 generations. You will live with boils. You will be attacked by, and he goes through all these horrible curses. This is the guy behind monotheism. They dressed him up in a little nicer uniform when they started bringing Jesus into it. And then Jesus is like, well, he's like the nice guy, he's like the good cop, bad cop, right? Where you've got Jehovah who's waiting to put you into hell because you're not perfect, and I'm not hyperbolizing. That's what the Bible says. If you're not perfect, you have to go to hell. And I hate sin, and I can't look at you, and so I have to take my son, ritually pour all of my hatred that I have towards you into my son, and then pour his blood all over you so that I can't see you anymore, and I only see my son's perfect blood. Now, please tell me, why would anybody want to worship that God? Why? Why would anybody want to worship that? That's who you're letting go of. But if it makes you feel any better, there's a lot of polytheists who see that the many gods are a reflection of the one God, or the one energy. So if you want to let go, if you don't want to let go of the idea of there being one source energy in the universe, you can still be a polytheist. You can ask a Hindu. Modern heathens don't understand it because they're still trapped in duality, many of them. But you ask a Hindu, is there only one God? They'll say, yes, there's only one God. And then in the same breath you say, but I thought there are a lot of gods. Oh, yes, there are many other gods. Are the gods symbolic? Yes, the gods are just symbolic of the one God. But wait, aren't the gods real? Oh, yes, the gods are very real. That's true polytheism. So that's what you're giving up. That's what you're going towards. So, to me, the choice is pretty simple, but at the same time, I understand because I've been there. I've been exactly where you're at, so I know exactly what you're going through. All right, so that got me kind of fired up. So I'm seeing, I don't know if there's more questions, but more people are chiming in here. Let's see. What is it about Qigong that attracts these deities? Well, that's a great question. For those of you who are new to my channel, I would highly recommend that you go to qigong.thunderwizard.com, and there I won't do it now, but I talk in depth about what this practice is. Celestial Qigong. So, what is it about Qigong that attracts the deities? Well, specifically, I'm hesitating because there's so many thoughts running through my brain. See if I can answer your question. What happens with Qigong is that you are connecting directly to life force energy. So as we said, the universe, space-time is made up of life force energy. So that means the gods are made up of life force energy as well. So by practicing Qigong, it opens up all of your meridians and gets you connected to this source of life force energy. And by that I don't mean God, I just mean the actual life force energy itself. And the gods respond to energy. The gods respond to sacrifice. So just by doing Qigong, you have more energy, and by that you become a bigger, it's like a bunch of flickering lights. Yours is flickering brighter, so they want to come to that. But more specifically, what's happening with celestial Qigong is that you are working with a very high vibrational frequency that the ancestors, the lineage masters. You know, if you're working with me, you're working with my lineage masters, the ascended masters of this lineage that I'm a part of. So when you do celestial qigong, you're basically saying to them, you're sending a bat signal to them. That's, you know, this is going to sound egotistical, but this is how lineages work. You're sending a bat signal to them, saying, "Hey, I'm a student of the Thunder Wizard," and so it's sort of like my seal of approval. Then they come and they want to help you, and they're going to give you access. You know, I've talked about this a lot. You know, we're talking about magic and stuff, but I tell people who are into using hallucinogens or plant teachers, for those that are interested, you know, I don't care what people do. They can do whatever the heck they want. I'm not here to judge anybody. But if you want to have a really trippy experience and have a far more intense spiritual experience with energy, use celestial qigong. If once you get that energy moving and it starts opening up the pineal and the pituitary, it'll release DMT, and it will get you into places you can't get to with hallucinogens or plant teachers. And one of the things that'll happen is you'll attract these celestial masters who will come and work with you. But again, don't do it if you're not ready to go through transformation. Because one of the things that'll happen when you work, these entities are working at such a high vibrational level, they assume that you want to be at that level, which means that they're not interested in coddling you. When you start working with this, all of your stuff is going to come up. All of the things. So again, if you're using magic, energy work, hallucinogens in order to escape, then you try and do something like this, it's going to be really a shock to your system. Because you have to pay a price for everything. If you want power, you have to pay a price. When you use plant teachers, you are paying a price with your energy. You're giving your energy away. You're going to have far much energy after using the hallucinogen than before. But you may have got something out of it. So you may have gotten an experience, you may have had a vision, you may have been given a gift, whatever. All kinds of things could have happened, but it's going to cost you with your life force energy. When you use celestial qigong, you aren't going to give up your energy. Your energy is going to increase. But what you will give up is going to be one of these limitations within yourself. Your ego. The price that you pay when you do celestial qigong is you have to give up pieces of your ego. And that will feel like a death. So when I talked about earlier, there was a point in my life when I had all kinds of crazy powers. It was not a pleasant experience for me, because to get to that power, I had to submit to myself and surrender to a lot of my own ego, and I had a lot of crap I had to get rid of, so I needed it. But it was potentially very uncomfortable. But the payoff was I had a ton of power, and I could do all kinds of crazy things. So. Anyway, I don't know if that was what your question was about. So again, qigong.thunderwizard.com to learn more about that practice. Okay. Again, looking for the questions. Alicia Cole is right. The Hebrews were not monotheists to begin with. They were polytheists. That's true. Thank you for bringing that up. We can see in the archaeological record that right at the time of the Babylonian captivity, the Hebrews were polytheists, and they were direct descendant of the Canaanites. And then when the elite who were taken into captivity by the Babylonians came back, they brought with them this monotheist religion, which within that religion had this mythology of the children of Israel wiping out the Canaanites, who are their own ancestors. So it's a symbol of them wiping out their shamanic polytheist history. It was revisionist history. So that's why, again, the The Old Testament is not history. It's a political document, mythology, trying to create another, it was a political thing. Anyway. All right, looking for the questions. Do I believe in free will? Absolutely. Again, watch my videos. That's all I talk about. You create everything. Everything is your own creation. But we also work in... The difference between religion is religion, when I say surrender, I'm not saying the same thing as religion. Religion says give up everything. Meaning give up your free will, that you're this worthless piece of garbage, and you're surrendering to God's will. Well, I'll carry my cross if that's what God wants from me. That's not what I'm saying at all. Not even close. What I'm saying is you are in cooperation. It's like, again, relationship. I talk about, in relationship with a partner. I can speak from a heterosexual male perspective because that's what I am. But I can tell you from my perspective, when a true woman comes along, then what I do is I submit to her. I submit to her power. And then she returns in kind. When I do that, then she actually then serves me. And then that's what you see on the outside. You see the man, like this is typified, symbolized with kings and queens. Kings and queens originally were supposed to be divine shamans who were acted to serve the population. And so they would act as a symbol of the true connection of the male and female, the yin and yang, Shiva and Shakti. And so I could go, there's so many symbols, but one is the queen sits to the left of the male, and the male may be holding the staff, right? So he has all of the power, but it's all for show. She's on his left. Now what that means is that the left side is the vulnerable side. It's the side that we use to, that symbolizes submitting and receiving. So it means he's completely submitted to her because she has access, she has direct access to him through his left side. But he has all the power on the outside. But she's the one that really has all the power. She's giving her power to him. So this is, don't get caught up in the symbols. You have to understand what the symbols mean. So going back to your question about free will, yeah, we have free will. Everything is free will. But if you submit yourself in a cooperative relationship to the universe, to Shakti, to energy, then she gives you everything. But you have to give up your false ego, your false identity of yourself. And when you do that, and it's not like she's demanding that of you, it's like, I can't give myself to you if you're wrapped up in your own ego. I can't do it. I want to, but I can't. And you show how much you love, again, from the male-female symbolic perspective here. A man shows how much he loves his Shakti when he gets on one knee and submits to her. And that makes her want to give and surround him with her energy. And surround him with her energy and empower him. And then he goes out for both of them and conquers the world or whatever it is he does. So this is what I mean by free will. So free will doesn't mean you just go rampant doing whatever the hell you want. You can, but it's not going to be fulfilling or happy. But the universe, this is something that people need to understand. The universe loves you and wants to have a relationship with you. So if we're talking about Shakti, she wants to have a relationship with you. When you submit yourself to her, she sees it as an act of love, like love making. And as a result, she wants to surround you with her energy and with her power and with her blessings. This is the relationship that is true worship. And this is what the goddess meant when the demon of ego said, marry me. And she said, if you can defeat me in battle, I'll marry you. Because the man who defeats her in battle is the man who has no ego and submits to her. And that's what slays her. I just, that's what makes her go rubbery. She can't fight anymore. She has to submit herself to him. So do you see how this is working? This is, again, my halting attempts to try and explain what free will is. All right, so looking again, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay. All right, so there we go. No more questions, so I am going to go ahead and stop it at this time. I think I kind of made my last point here, which is that, the way to get to work through the issues connected to the Saturn deities, especially the goddess, is to go to her as a child and trust her and take all of your pain and all of your sorrow and all of your limitations and ask for her help. And when you do that, then she can come to you as the mother. And when you surrender, again, it's like, imagine, your mom trying to pick out a thorn or something in your face. It's going to be painful as hell. But she's doing it to get rid of that so that you won't cause an infection which might kill you. She's trying to heal you. So submit to that. Let her do that work. And then the end result is, when you come out the other side, you will be filled with a compassion. You will be filled with a humility. And then you will have true power. You will know what true power is. Anyway, that's enough babbling for me. I'm a little frustrated with myself. I'm wanting to get to the core of what I'm feeling, but I'm just kind of grasping at words here, so I'm just going to stop while I'm ahead. So, before we go, if you want to know, people are asking me, how do I work with Saturn? If you want to know, first you need to know if Saturn is a deity that you need to be working with in ritual. If you want to know how to do the science of that, what will work specifically for you, including not only the deity, the direction, the element, the mantra, the seed sound that goes with the mantra, all of those things, you are wired in such a way where you have a way that will work instantly for you to connect with any planetary deity. So the way to do that is to go to astrology.thunderwizard.com, get an astrology reading from me. I will give you all that information and help you create the ritual that you are designed for. And anybody who's worked with me and done them will tell you how powerful this is. This is a science. The next thing that I recommend is that you get this deity, or get the streaming version of this deity. Get this DVD or the streaming version of this DVD. And that, again, is the fastest way and the most powerful way to give yourself the ability to intend your reality. It will also bring your whole body up to a much higher vibration, what we call the light body. And the light body is what allows you to be able to communicate directly with the ascended masters and get you on a path to becoming an ascended master. Anyway, I could go on and on and on about all that. So those are the two things I recommend. Go to qigong.thunderwizard.com and also go to astrology.thunderwizard.com. And maybe I should make a package out of those two. Okay, so that's it for now, my friends. One last check. Maybe somebody has a really great question that's drawn to me. Oh, all right. I was just about, I felt this going, and I felt this going through my my head. Somebody, Wilma Hopkins, says, I've had a vision of a medicine wheel. Are you drawn to say anything about that as I'm drawn to you? Yes, I was thinking about that, so I'm glad that I listened to my instincts. I almost turned off the thing, but yes, for those of you who are not familiar with a lot of what I teach, I use what is called a thunder wheel. So the thunder wheel is an 8-sided medicine wheel that is used all over the world. So for those who aren't familiar with what I do, one of the things I've done is I've spent the last 25 years of my life researching and practicing traditions that have an unbroken connection into prehistory. What I found is that among many of them, there is a science to using what most people would refer to as the medicine wheel. And so I do teach that. I do teach things connected to that. One of them is thunder shamanism. So the way to learn how to do that, if you really want to get into that science, go to thunderwizard.com and sign up at whatever level that works for you. And then what you do is you go and you hit the more button, you scroll to the bottom and you hit more, and keep scrolling until you get all the way to the bottom of the page. And then I teach a very in-depth, very precise method of how to use the thunder wheel in shamanism for things like, you know, opening up the gates to the 9 worlds, working with the deities and the entities, the dwarves and the elves, the gods, and I teach you, you know, how to connect with all of these energies in order to intend your reality, which is really what shamanism is all about, to affect your reality. So I'm glad you asked that question. I also have other things here. We have, well, we'll just leave it at that. We have some other things as well. The Spell of the 9 Knots DVD, which uses the thunder wheel. There's also a DVD called Thunder Shamanism. And a book as well called Thunder Shamanism. But it is also a way to work with the runes, which I teach in this book here. Whoops, wrong book, not that one. Which I teach in this book here. Anyway, so, and then of course we have Medicine Wheel Qigong DVD as well. So, thank you for reminding me. That was going through my mind, and then you asked that question. Benjamin Cahlon asks, what do you think about the blessing God gave Moses and the sons of Israel? Well, in order for me to have an opinion on that, I would have to believe in Jehovah. I don't. I don't know if that blessing might be a later representation of a pre-monotheist Hebrew blessing or something. I don't know, but I do not give any credence to Jehovah or to any of the stuff connected to that, because again, I think Jehovah is nothing more than the human ego. So I think the Bible only really works to, you know, go in that vein. I won't get off on it, but Hollywood movies are not giving subliminal messages. They're not. Thomas Ritchie, they're not. You know, you can find subliminal messages everywhere. If you want to find 23, you can find 23 everywhere. If you want to find the number 11, you can find 11. If you want to find 66 or 666, you can find it everywhere. So I don't think there's any real. I don't think Hollywood is connected to some secret cabal that is sending out subliminal messages to control you. In case that was your question, I don't believe that. That's a fear-based nonsense that I don't buy into. Okay, so that is now going to be it for me today. Thanks for showing up. If you're coming on late, you can wait till this is archived and go back and watch it from the beginning. Again, go to thunderwizard.com to learn more about the Advanced Shamanism course. Go to qigong.thunderwizard.com, which is spelled QIGONG.thunderwizard.com, to learn how to achieve the light body and communicate with the Ascended Masters. And go to astrology.thunderwizard.com if you want to learn how you can work specifically with your very specific ritual that you are attuned to. That's something I can help you with. Of course, I've got all kinds of other things out there as well. So go to, just type in michaelwilliamdenny.com if you want to see all my books. Type Michael William Denny into Amazon, into movies and TV if you want to see all my DVDs. All right, so that's it for me for today, my friends. Thank you so much for this opportunity again, for being able to be a part of your empowerment and your awareness, and thank you for allowing me to do my job. I appreciate that. I look forward to talking to you guys very soon. Take care.